business will be public comment. I see we have public comment.
Today, what I wanted to report, Kellum DeForest, what I wanted to report on is that I got an email from Ray Hawthorne
Oh, yes.
announcing that they finally, he and the owner of the property, the Flores Casitas on Stanwood Drive, that a couple of years ago you made a structure of merit, and they've been fighting City Hall, or at least the building department, since then to get permits to rehabilitate that building. So, and it finally went through yesterday. So, wanted to announce that, and I'm sure Ray or Ms. Dye, and thank your Landmark Commission for designating it and seeing that it went through. So there's a plus for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Is there any other public comment? Next item of business will be approval of the minutes of February 16th. Are there any revisions or comments? Ms. Murray.
See, on page 5, under the motion for item 2, in number 2, says reduce the box size. Did we say to 15 gallon, or no? I sort of have this memory of reduce the box size of the eucalyptus to 15 gallon. If not, I guess it's understood.
I don't recall that we
Okay.
specified what size.
I had mentioned 15 gallons because I understood that was the largest size you can get a Citrodora in because of the fact it grows so fast. And in a few years it'll be larger than a box anyway, so.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
originally I had specified the amount, the number,
Oh, yes.
and it was corrected by staff. So should I put the 15 gallon in there?
I will ask the commission if they wish to limit it to 15.
Sure.
Is that okay, or
Yeah.
the landscape architect here?
Personally, a 5-gallon would do better than 15, so
Okay.
if we don't specify that it's a 15, they have the option of doing a 5 as well, which I think will do a lot better than a 15.
Let's leave it then as a generic box size reduction.
Okay, and the second one is on page 10, just a small addition. Motion at the top for number 2. I thought if you could just say the driveway throat, then it will just, we will know that we'll talk about the driveway.
Okay,
And that's it, Madam Chair.
thank you. Are there any other revisions? Oh, Gabriella, what a job. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Next item of business is the consent calendar.
Okay, Madam Chair. 121 State Street is final as submitted of details. 2559 Puesta del Sol is final as submitted of details. 18 East Ortega Street, final approval of color as submitted. 318 State Street is referred to the full commission. We want to see if you have time to take a look at that. 651 Paseo Nuevo was project development approval and final as submitted with conditions. 905 Laguna Street was project development approval with final approval as submitted. 900 State Street was project design approval with conditions, continued 2 weeks. And that consent calendar was heard by Don Sharp, and we had a landscape item was heard by Phil Seating.
I'll make a motion to ratify the consent calendar.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries, and may I?
Steps down on item
Okay. Let me just ask where you might think in the agenda we're going to put the forwarded item.
I don't know because it was just handed to me as I came in.
Okay.
It would probably be best if we just put it at the beginning and try and,
Okay. Then we will bump the first item for a consent item. That's all right. Next item of business is announcements.
okay, let me see if I can find them. Okay, the hearing for the project at 34 West Victoria Street, which was continued from February 2nd, has been postponed 2 weeks to March 16th at the architect's request. That's not actually on your
Thank you.
agenda, that's just for the public information. Commissioner Sharp will be stepping down on item number 5, 101 West Cannon Perdido Street,
Mm.
and Michael Drury will be absent from today's meeting.
Thank you.
And then I have one more item that probably would fall under announcements, would be the quickest way to take care of this. The commission asked for a little bit of information on that storefront that was damaged.
Oh, yes.
I just
The
wanted
black
to
glass.
real quick. I'll be brief. This is what it currently, or this is what the
Oh, yes.
condition was prior to being damaged. This is what it currently looks like.
No.
Very clever graphics, so taking advantage of a bad situation.
Did they
again.
go to the sign committee?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Although the letters are less than 12 inches in height.
Yeah, well, 10 is what they're supposed to.
Okay. I just wanted, the building was originally built in 1940. It's a Delfonso building.
Mm. Yeah.
And the original storefront, as proposed, let's see if I can get this down. It's going to be kind of hard to see on this. As proposed,
Ooh, zoomed right
was
in.
a symmetrical, it's a 3 bays symmetrical pattern, rather high tile baseboards, large plate glass, and transoms. And then through the design process, it actually got revised
Oh.
to look like this. They got rid of the transom, made the plate glass larger, dropped the sills a little bit, you know, with the kick plate on the door. The current storefront, the earliest reference that I find to it in any actual document is in 1981. Of course, we know that's a lot older than 1981. I was unable to determine, through looking through old historic photographs and through the plans we have, exactly when it went in. I would guess from the style of it, it has that sort of 1940s Hollywood glamour look to it. Yeah, that's when the actual building was done. And what makes me think that it's close to the construction, the time of the construction of the building, is that a lot of times they came in, rather than coming in with new plans, they would just draw on the old plans for a new permit. And you can see this takes the exact shape of this storefront window. So I'm guessing that that's, if not the original
Quite.
storefront, it's awful close to it. And my guess is it probably went in, you know, it got altered several times while the tenants were deciding what they were going to be. So it does have the potential of historic significance. It doesn't actually meet the historic district guidelines because of the fact that it's very modern. But I know that there was a lot of concern in this commission that because of its uniqueness, that we want to try and nudge the applicant towards repair rather than following the guidelines of putting in a Hispanic storefront. I just wanted to get that direction from you all again, so when the owner, there's dealing with insurance and whatnot, so when the owner contacts me, I can better advise them as to how this commission sees how this should play out. If restoring to the 1940s facade is the way you want to go, or design guidelines, the building should be starting to be pushed towards the Hispanic design. And with that, I'll ask for your opinion.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
I think
Mr. Suding.
Since this is part of a set, that it ought to revert to its original, which is what you see in that photograph.
Are there any dissenting opinions?
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, well, that's the direction we'll move in when I want to get
Mr. Jacobus, could you identify the address so the public knows what you're talking about?
Oh, it's 1329 through 1331 State Street. It's directly in front of the Arlington Theater.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Suding.
On March 17th, I will be going to Planning Commission to listen to and talk to the Highway 101 Milpas and Hot Springs Cabrillo Operational Improvement Project, which is now being referred to as the Salinas ramp.
Thank you.
And I will also be stepping down on item 7.
Item 7. Thank you. Are there any other announcements? Seeing none, are there any subcommittee reports? None. Let's move then to the consent calendar item, which has been moved up to this.
Madam Chair.
Yes. This is 318 State Street. It's a review after final.
I have 2 here, so.
This is to clarify timber construction at trellis and storefront, clarify HVAC rooftop equipment, and add a man door on the east elevation. Perhaps, Mr. Sharp, you'd like to fill us in.
This appeared today before consent, and the questionable items are a wood trellis that was originally glulam, and this board requested that it be made out of timber in lieu of glulams. And the applicant is requesting a reson or rough glulam, probably reson, to get an approval for that because of structural reasons. And part of the approval is now to add new air conditioning units on the roof. And he is prepared to make his case on both of those issues. There are a couple other man doors that are being added, which are not a problem, but I think maybe quickly go over that so you can handle everything at once.
Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Jeff Hornbuckle from Cornell Angelitis Architects.
Thank you.
So, as Commissioner Sharp mentioned, the man doors, we've added one here for exiting purposes. We have a new electrical room, so we've added a man door there. And as well at the loading dock. They've had to raise this floor to match what's happening over here, so we've added, there's a door with landing and steps coming down. I'll show you those in elevation. So here's the first, which is required for exiting. The second is the man door at the electrical room, and the third is at the loading dock.
Is there anything else you want to make a case for?
Well, the trellis. Look. Here's a section of the trellis. Originally, it was shown as glulams. There seemed to be, I guess, some confusion on our part from the final HLC meeting. We were under the assumption that resawn glulams would be acceptable, so that's where the question is now, whether resawn and solid body stained glulams are acceptable. And final issue is the rooftop equipment. So I have some photos which show the existing rooftop condition. There's all kinds of equipment up there now. And so we would be eliminating all this equipment and replacing it with 9 new HVAC units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Those units are 4 feet wide by 8 feet long by 4 feet tall. And go to the section here. Shows that the units are below the ridges. And just one of the questions that came up this morning was, the visibility of those units. You can see in this photo here that's really the only unit that's visible today, and that is this unit here. And so we've pulled it back a little bit and turned it so that the short side is facing that facade. And I do have a couple exhibits here from the parking lot. When that unit becomes available over the parapet. So it's basically at 150 feet back from the face of the building, which puts a person, basically at the back of the parking lot near Anacapa.
Is there any public comment on this item? If not, I'll take questions from the commissioners.
Was they facing from the freeway?
No, I mean, you can see, we had an aerial that we were looking at earlier, but I mean, there's so much, it shows here the dense trees along the freeway that it's not going to be visible. And plus the fact that there's a ridge here, so these are all below this ridge line. So,
Are there any other questions? None? Have comments then?
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
have to abstain because I wasn't part of the previous discussion.
That's correct. Is there any possibility of having the minutes from the previous approval which talks about the trellis? Wanted to see how unclear we were.
One thing also to consider would be using color as one possibility to help minimize the impact should you decide that these are acceptable.
It's an exhaust. Trusting here. I have one question.
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of other extraneous exhaust ducting and miscellaneous fans. All that's coming off along with these
correct.
evap coolers?
Correct, yeah. So the new units, are more, they're a little bit longer than these, but that's more of the, what those things are going to look like, the new units.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the minutes, the motion stated preliminary approval and continued for weeks, and then historic resource findings were made. There were no other comments in the motion.
Oh.
That was from preliminary.
So
Should
this
be
is a
final.
review
It would be
after
final.
Yeah.
Yes, to be a final.
I think it was in September.
September 15th,
Yeah.
correct.
Final approval and continued indefinitely to the consent calendar for details with the following conditions. 1, glulam for the trellis is not acceptable. Genuine wood, either rough sawn or other, is preferred.
Well, that sounds pretty clear to me.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I mean, from what we, were thinking at the meeting, like I said, I think the confusion was obviously on our part. So, we thought we would try to see if if that was acceptable to do resawn, solid body stained glue lamp.
Okay. Well,
So,
do I have any other comments or motions?
I just think we should stay with what we had said, because I think that's the most important part of this building. That it's a very important feature of the building that we really wanted to be compliant with the guidelines.
So, yeah. May I have a motion?
Do we need a motion to stand by our previous approval?
Well, are we going to continue this item to consent, or?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think it was referred to the full board, and therefore you should
To the
act
full
on
board.
it and take action as far as your agenda. And I don't know if Mr. Sharp gave any direction specific. I think he inferred that the doors were acceptable, so you can include that in your motion also.
So I'll look for a motion.
Well, we have the HVAC units
Mhm.
to deal with also.
Are there any comments about that?
Mr. Sharp, were you okay with the way the units were hidden?
I asked him to bring back more information to this meeting. The parapet that you see shaded in dark facing facing Anacapa Street, certainly shields some, but you step on either side of that and you can see these units. The question, I believe, boils down to whether or not there's an improvement over what's there now and what is proposed, cleaning up of the existing sheet metal, and there are lots of examples of that here. We're certainly not going to hide the units, and so it's a matter of an improvement versus no improvement, or grouping them together with a parapet or something that would maybe cause more attention to them.
Right.
Madam Chair, if I can help, I think historically the commission has determined if they are partially visible, whether they should be painted or whether they could accept the colors as fabricated. So that would be another consideration. I believe these look to be painted or to match closely to the roof. So that would be another element. If you decide to keep them as they're proposed, that could be a decision on your part.
Okay, well, I'm still looking for a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion to restate our position on the subject of the trellis, that glue lamp is not acceptable, and to approve the change in the roof units as long as they're painted.
Oh,
Sorry.
not valid.
As long as they're painted to match the roof surface,
And the man doors?
and to approve the
Doors.
man doors.
The human
And the
doors.
new stairway and handrail.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll
for that?
second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nima, what was the actual motion? Was that final approval?
Yes.
Because it is it's a final approval already.
I'm not sure this is working.
That motion for final approval was passed with 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you for fitting me in. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
I'm gonna turn it on, nothing happens. Okay.
We'll go right to item number 1, which is 322 East Cannon Perdido, the Historic Structures Report.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Suding.
I
you have some more of
forgot
those
to
booklets. Yes.
mention that I have these books.
Yes, and they,
If
mine
people
was
want
pink.
them.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. I have these booklets if people want them from Mr. Suding. Yes? Yes?
Oh, this is
Me too. Thank you. Looks like you've got takers for everyone. Okay. My apologies for the delay. Will you introduce yourselves to the record?
Pamela Post, Post Hazeltine Associates.
Thank you.
And I'm Peter Becker, the architect, and Tim Hazeltine, Post Hazeltine Associates.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobus?
Yes, Madam Chair. This is a situation where we have an applicant that wants to make some changes that maybe push the envelope, or maybe are over the top. First, I want to sort of set the stage in that we have certain historic buildings, designated historic buildings that should stay static in time. For instance, El Cortel. It would make no sense to modernize El Cortel because it's kept static as the last remaining piece of our earliest history. This is a house that's been altered a couple of times, although by very significant architects. It was originally built by Louise Murphy Bay, and then was altered by Luda Maria Riggs 20 years later. I think that there is some ability to make improvements to the house in that this house, part of its history is that it is evolving over time. We just wanted to make sure that you're comfortable with what those alterations would be. If you go to the report on page 44, under the summary and conclusions, there's some mitigation measures listed. And what we'd like you to do, I know this is a little bit unusual from the way we've done things, but because the report and the plans conflict with each other somewhat, and the architect is here because he's interested in, and he like everything on the list. I kind of think there's going to be some compromise in here. We'd like to get your opinion on these items. For instance, eliminate the proposed skylight from the design scheme at the east elevation. And the skylight, although we normally don't like to approve skylights on historic buildings, it is hidden on the second cross gable behind the front facing gable. In terms of the house interior, it's a very dark interior, and the skylight would be, from a functional standpoint, would do a lot to bring a lot of light deep into that house where it's really needed. Talks about revising the scheme of the enclosed porch. They talked about, for example, maybe using board and bat siding. We've done that successfully on a number of projects because it kind of differentiates the new work from the old. Board and bat's a historic material for the time period. However, in this case, as drawn by the architect, it is shown in stucco, but it does step off the corners of the building and reads as being an addition. Talks about revising the proposal to eliminate the French door from the north elevation. Staff would agree with that. The French door is initially, when I first started talking with the architect and they came in and started asking questions about the house and whether it was historic, and we had the initial conversation, I thought that maybe the gravestake fence and the French doors wouldn't be a bad thing. But now that I go out and I stand and I look at the house, I think that corner is kind of important like it is. And so that was one aspect of the mitigation measures that staff would like to see stay in place. So we would recommend that they eliminate the gravestake fence and not put the French door in the bathroom. And then also simplify the design of the entrance gates. The gates, as drawn, are beautiful, but maybe they're a little bit elaborate for the small scale of the house. So the way staff sees it is there's some potential compromise in here. They get some features that maybe we're not totally crazy about, but they're really not going to do that much damage or have a negative impact on this historic resource. If we do recommend that all this mitigation measure stays in place and the architect wants to pursue it, he can. And Michael here can talk about the secret issues. You get into negative declarations and EIRs and things that maybe we want to try and avoid as much as we can, for a small project like this. So again, staff is asking if you would take those items one at a time and have your discussion and make a determination as to whether you think that's something that could be supported, or if it's something that you could not support, and then we'll take it from there as to how we may have to alter the report. And I think Michael Berman would like to say something to you also regarding the CEQA aspects of this.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I just wanted to point out some of the rules of the game as far as CEQA is concerned. Typically for a small project that is proposing changes to a historic structure that are consistent with Department of Interior, Secretary of Interior guidelines, the project can be exempt from further CEQA review. It's a fairly simple procedure, doesn't require a lot of time and money, but there's been quite a bit of case law in recent years, and it basically says that you cannot exempt a project that would result in changes that are not inconsistent with Secretary of Interior standards, which triggers the requirement for an initial study that probably is going to cost in fees alone about $8,000. It's a substantial expense. Of course, we will go that route if we have to, but there are other options. The applicant could change the project, or we could find, with good reasoning and based on facts, that these changes are in fact consistent with Secretary of Interior standards. And that concludes my brief presentation. If you want to ask any questions, I'll be available.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the Commission?
Madam Chair?
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Is it a practice that the Commission takes a site visit?
It has been in the past. And in fact, there was a site visit that was requested early on when there was a garage that was proposed, and then the garage was removed and we canceled the site visit.
I was wondering if maybe a site visit would be appropriate, particularly this is a significant building, and I understand and I sympathize with the idea of making it more livable. But I also think that perhaps looking at the building on the site visit would be important. And I was just wondering what the procedure is for the Commission or individuals to have a site visit.
Madam Chair, I think we also have the plans that it may help just to look at the plans and see what the changes would entail.
I did look at the plans, and I still maintain I'd like to see the,
It's an unusual
I've driven
building.
by it and things like this, but I'm a visual person, and that always helps me to actually look at things.
The process would be, I assume, if the Commission wishes to have a site visit, we would then agendize it and this project would be delayed. So let's hear more of the Commissioner's questions, or are there any other questions? Or,
I just want to disclose that I made a site visit, and then I also spoke to the architect and also met the owner.
Thank you. There are no more questions. Let's...
Madam Chair, also I maybe didn't make it clear enough that you couldn't approve this project at this hearing because the environmental review considerations would be substantial at this time.
I see. Yes.
We can't approve the document or the project. There's
You
two
could-
items on our agenda. One
Yes,
is
I
the
understand.
historical report.
Well, we would recommend that we give advice to the applicant and the consultant about the Commission's views about the appropriateness of these changes. And depending on what that outcome is, the applicant could elect to incorporate some of these items into the project or not. And the consultant could change the report and then come back to accept the report as it is. If you were to accept the report as it is, if the applicant wished to proceed, as I said earlier, the environmental review would take months and cost substantial amount of money.
Now I understand. But if we choose to, we could accept the report today.
If you choose to, but we recommend we find another path at this time.
Are you recommending then that we table the report and then review the drawings and then come back to the report afterwards?
I recommend that you look at the drawings and give the applicant and the consultant feedback on what your view is about the appropriateness of these changes to the building in terms of their consistency with the Department of Interior standards.
Understood. So, Madam Chair, I move to table the historical structures report.
I have a second.
I have a second there. Thank
All
you.
those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. Shall we move on then to item number 2, which is a review of the project? I stay. Mr. Becker, and perhaps you'll slant your presentation in view of what has just happened.
Okay. Well, last time you saw this project, we were proposing a pergola-shaped carport, and we decided that we don't need that, and so we're abandoning that idea. Another comment you made was that there's this one post holding up this porch right now, and so we wanted to create a wall across here with a new gate and a new window, and your suggestion was to push that wall in a little bit from this front wall here to show that this is separate from that, and that seemed like an excellent idea, and that's what we did do, to push that in. I think the third thing I can remember that you talked about was a concern of our little chimney that we wanted to add right here. And that is where the historians and I all agree that the chimney would be very much like the existing chimney. It would be small. It was only for a gas-only fireplace that they want to put in the corner. So therefore, it doesn't require any of the heights that a modern fireplace chimney requires. So therefore, it's just to hold a little B vent. So it would just be a little tiny structure that would be like that. And it could be, according to the historians, taken down later, and it wouldn't, it could be restored back to the way it is. So those were the 3 comments that I remember that you were concerned about last time. And then one of the other things was the gate. And it's very hard to get David Shelton to get his drawings on time here. We got them today. And this is our revised drawings, which is a much simpler version of the one that you saw last time. It's trying to incorporate 2 of the pieces of ironwork that are, the one that's on the street that has a lot of these little curlicue things on it, on the bottom, and then the main gate, which is a lovely gate, has very similar. This is very similar to that. So, but it's a very square form. So it's not like trying to be anything other than a sort of utilitarian gate, which is, we think, in keeping with this modest house, and in keeping with the existing ironwork, and with just this a few little extra flourishes of ours, but are very much, we think, like the flourishes on the main gate and on the front ironwork. The skylight, I think, have we shown you the pictures of the skylight? There is an existing skylight right there that was put in probably in 1935, I think. They said when this addition was added on to by, we think, they, I guess. But the tenant named Carpenter evidently had something to do with building it. So that skylight...
Perhaps you can leave that photograph out, as that is this gate in which you are referring to.
That's a good one. This is a picture of the existing skylight that was added while they owned the property and presumably built the building next door, as opposed to having her tenant build it. And what we would like to do is redo the exact same thing on the other side of that wall, so that this area right here, which is the other side of that archway, would have that. We've gone out there and taken pictures, and you have to be directly across the neighbor's property right here. You have to be up high in order to see any change in the roof. You cannot see where that skylight would go from the street. So the only place it's noticeable would be from here. And we have plans to raise some vegetation along here to get more privacy, more screening, so that from here you don't see the parked cars here. So that will be even further taken away. I think it's important to look at what they was trying to do originally. As Mr. Jacobus pointed out to me, she twisted the building to be in the same axiality with the other adobes of that period. That was the main reason for the twist, and that the house I think he lives in is nearby that has that same twist. That she was trying to do with brick and the material, because she had the brick from the evidently the old Arlington and hotel, and she painted it white to make it look like adobe. She was trying to do something, obviously, that was very much in keeping with what the original adobes looked like. And so when she added, or she had Luda Riggs added this part right in the front, I thought it seemed like it was a 1950s version of trying to be in keeping with the 1920s, like we saw so many times where architects in the 1970s around Santa Barbara were creating 1970s versions of that, and it's not very good. You know, the ironwork I don't think is very good. I don't think the plaster is definitely Luda Riggs of a period of the 1950s, but it's the kind of plaster that we all try to avoid today. So I'm addressing one thing that we think is really important, the client really very much wants to have, is to be able to walk out here, to have this little place that otherwise is a no man's land. It's not a garden, it's nothing. There's no way to get there except around here, and it is a security risk that anybody could jump up on this wall today and get into the property. And so we need to close it off somehow. Our feeling was that what we would like to do is replace this Luda Riggs window from the 50s with a Vey French door of the 20s, and which would be more in keeping with the idea of what they had all along. We would like to, right now there is screening all across here, that this is a lot of bougainvillea. There's a couple of bougainvillea plants that are growing here quite healthily, and other things growing up. I just wanted to put an armature of any kind. The grape stake seemed to me to be a kind of fence that is not trying to be anything. It's just very, very plain. It could be stained dark. It would go away, and it would have vines covering it, the same vines that are there today. And so the idea is to be able to have this bathroom right here, to have these French doors opening out on a tiny little place that you could actually go out and enjoy the sunshine. At the same time, keeping people from the street from getting up there. All of the rest of our suggestions, I think, we all agree on. There's this area here where I feel that to introduce a third material to a house would be not quite right, and especially in a small place that might get too busy. So that they use brick painted white. Luda Riggs used plaster. And if we were to use, say, board and batten along here, because this is, we think, very important, because right now, people use this as a living room, and this is, you know, the kitchen and bedrooms. And there's a lot of, there will be, when it's done, a lot of traffic going right across between one building and the next. And it is covered with glass, but you still walk outside, and people can see through there right now. And so we think it's reasonable to try to close that off. What we'd like to do is take, there's two really, well, there's three very beautiful doors, evidently from the Arlington Hotel. One goes into the main building here, and one goes in, no, I'm sorry, there's two. And so the one that, the rest of the French doors. And so we take one of those and put it over here. We don't even have to change the hinges on the thing. And that would give us the ability to let people go back and forth across here without having to enclose it any other way, and reuse this wonderful door that is really, really significant. So we thought that your idea last time of stepping this in a little bit and making out a plaster so it just doesn't kind of stand in your face as being of third material would be an acceptable way to go. And then here, along here, we would like to carry that theme. That there's a beautiful theme that was started by this gate right here in this old wall that belongs to the adobe right here. And so they continued that theme when they built this right here. And you can see that the way that the bricks stand proud in these little sections like that. And so it's our idea to reproduce this arch, which really is, you don't need that arch right now, after we put our gate in and the other things we'd like to do, and put it right here and have the gate have more usefulness. But to keep that arch there. And then also down at the end of our proposed wall, by the way, we want this wall to look like this wall, which is one of the most beautiful walls I've ever seen. Just this adobe wall with the beautiful little terracotta tiles on top. That this will extend down to here, and it has this little corner post at the end with a finial on top, and it would be composed in that same way. I can't think of that we're saving the lanterns. I can't think of any other thing that the historians had some concern about. Is there?
Skylight, enclosed porch, French door, grape stake fence, and entrance gates.
Yeah. And also, this proposed French door is not on the front facade. I mean, it is, it's on, it's facing the front, but it's several feet back. And so it is, to my mind, something of a gray area as you're calling it on the front, especially when there is this little garden in front, which is raised up behind that big wall.
Okay, I'm going to ask for questions from the public. Is there any public comment?
Good afternoon, Kellum DeForest. I do not see why you have your historic construction report, and on page 44, I know you've shelved it, but the Messrs. Post and Hazeltine are very adept at reading the interpreting the Secretary of Interior's standards, and I gather this, we're not restoring this house, but just rehabilitating it. And I commend their suggestions, and I don't see why I deplore them being thrown out just because they don't quite fit the architects or owners' idea of what fit the architects and owners' desires. This is a historic resource, and the Secretary of Interior back in the last century or in the 1990s figured out what would be best, or what works for historic structures. And I know you haven't, the City of Santa Barbara hasn't completely bought onto all of the standards. Sometimes you wish to make things, especially in Spanish colonial structures, blend in more to the Spanish, or you don't follow their idea of having differentiating materials or as to set off the new additions. But I just think the summary and conclusions of, or the conclusions of the historic structures post-Hazeltine should be followed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, take questions from the commission, please.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
Just to address the issue of the Secretary of the Interior standards, they are interpreted quite differently in various parts of the country. For instance, if you go to Washington, D.C., where these things supposedly originated, it's not uncommon to see a row of 4-story brick townhouses from the 1700s with a steel and glass tower growing out of the center of them.
Correct.
And that was determined there that you've differentiated from the original architecture by total change of materials. This commission has in the past been more subtle in terms of how that's interpreted, and because a lot of the buildings we're working on are maybe non-historic but within the district, you've been more likely to pursue a stance of having it be more like it was seamless rather than being differentiated. So just for Mr. Kellum to understand that it can be interpreted different ways.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
yes.
Question of the commission itself. When this was previously reviewed, the recommendation was to make the entry door more part of the breezeway. I've just read it. Was it the intent of that comment on the proposed plan on sheet A 2.1, to put the entry door in more or less the location of the E and entry porch, between E and center line?
I just want to say something while they're looking. But when this project came for me, I remember being very, very concerned about that breezeway being open. Right. So you have the sense of the two buildings. And at the time, the historic report had not come in. So we, because of all those puzzlements and those other things, so the commission might have made some comments, but I just remember wanting to, requesting that the historic report, which the owners have very nicely have done before the project, to the report to come to us. So I actually feel that having that report is the first requirement to this before we even really get to the nitty-gritty of the project. That was my understanding.
Understood.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Let's be ready for comments.
just,
Madam Chair, I'd recommend that we table this item and return to the Historic Structures report. Is that appropriate, Staff?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, what we're looking for is some guidance for both the applicant and the consultant to either compromise by changing the project or by changing the report to, on each one of the items listed as a substantial impact in the recommendations, so that either they are consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards or they've been removed from the project and are no longer proposed. So what I'm looking for is a recommendation for each issue.
Very well. Let's go through each
And
item then. Or unless there's a strong need to go back to the report. We can either discuss it in the report or, all right. Let's go for the first item, which is eliminate the proposed skylight from the design scheme for the east elevation. Who wishes to make a comment? I'm amazed we're practically right on time for the next item, but I don't see the applicant. So I will ask for a 3-minute break.
A 3-minute break is supposed to be up.
Whoop.
Perhaps not. Yes, you're right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call us back to order. The applicant is back here. Start. Okay.
Make all those notes.
Yes. This next item is 210 West Carrillo Street. It's a concept review, new. Will you introduce yourselves to the record while we wait for the drawings?
Sure, I'm Clay Rowe with AB Design Studio, and this is Eric Bear from my office. And next to me is Chris Gilliland.
Well, you're going to get it.
Did I get it right this time?
Thank
from
you.
Common Ground Landscape Design. It's only taken me 4 or 5 times to get that right.
I'm not sure I can ever get it right. Oh, all right.
Maybe 10.
Okay. Take us through it.
Do you have photos in the file, Jake?
So I'm sorry, we're missing a staff member. Poor Jake is running around like crazy
Good
here.
job. One of these was colored.
Oh, he wants to cut.
No! Sorry. Sorry, Mr. LaVoy. This is for the TV.
Photographs?
No, we have these two. I guess we could have.
Oh, you mean on the, I see. Okay.
We're looking at a project here at Carrillo Plaza, which is at the corner of De La Vina and Carrillo Street, or Boulevard, excuse me. And the project the site comprises of 3 buildings. One is the old Caro's building. That's the project we're looking at today. The other 2 buildings have recently gone through a color change with HLC on consent and been approved, and the changes that we're doing to this building will reflect that as well for the entire center. But this is the building as you see it heading downtown on Carrillo. This is the parking lot side of the building. This used to be the old Caro's. It's currently has a church tenant in it. We're doing some shell core improvements. The church is going to be, they're looking for new space. This building's going to be vacant, and we're going to be looking to put new tenants in it. So we're doing some remedial changes. It needs a new roof because it's leaking. It needs new mechanical systems because they're failing. It needs new electrical upgrade because it's substandard. And more importantly, it needs a little bit of architectural help. Here is the building in the the west side of the site. We're not proposing anything on that, but this is just for context. Here's the building to the northwest portion of the site. Again, we're not doing anything to that. It's just for context. Here's looking into the project site from Carrillo. Here's our building here on the right. And there's the other building as part of our site. These are just other photos. And then context of the neighborhood, or directly across De La Vina is the backside of Ralph's service entry. Here's a view of the liquor store as it faces De La Vina. There's a small alleyway that accesses this residential property, multi-unit. And this is directly across the street, a small group of retail commercial spaces. One used to be Quantum. I don't think they're there anymore. Mondio used to be in there. I think quite a few of those are vacant at the moment. Here's another shot of the back of Ralph's. Here is a shot of our site as it faces. This is Spud Nuts. This is actually on our property. This is the adjacent CVS next door, just in terms of what's around us. Again, some more context. And then this is really where we're doing the scope of our work. Here's the Carrillo elevation of
Ken, just for
excuse me,
Right
yeah.
here.
Carrillo elevation of the corner building, the old Caros, and then here's a corner elevation showing where we're doing our work. The scope of our project is really from about here to here on the property. So it's really the corner of the building is where we're doing our work.
Okay.
I'll run you through the site plan real quick. I believe the photos on our photo sheet are the same ones we've looked at, so I won't go through those. So here's our project site. These are the existing commercial buildings that are to remain. This is the corner building where we're doing our work. We have several large trees here that are impinging on parking lot, sidewalk, building foundations, so we're proposing to remove those, and we'll talk about that with the landscape plan. This roof is going to be replaced like for like. We're cleaning up some of the things here. When the church moved in, they boarded up all the windows that were here, so we're going to open them back up. I'll show you what we're doing there. Here's a floor plan of the building and a roof plan. This is an existing mechanical well where we'll be housing our units. We haven't sized them yet, but we know that we'll make sure that they're screened. This is the current floor plan showing where we're doing some demolition. There's actually a ramp up. If anybody went to the old Caros a long time ago, they had a ramp that came up, and there was a dining area back here. We're going to cut this area off so that we can have a potential tenant move in this space, and then we'll remodel this interior for a future tenant here. So we don't know who's moving in yet, but we know that we want to make this multi-tenant. And then this is really the scope of work where we're doing. This is an existing window that's actually there today, an existing window that exists today, and these are existing windows that exist today. They've been boarded up on the inside, and there's been these enclosures built around the outside to sort of block them off as well. But the windows are actually in place. We're proposing to pull them out and put some new fenestrations in. There's some planters, that run around this way and this here that we're going to remodel and replant, and we're going to try to utilize this area as an outdoor patio area for some potential tenant. We're going to propose filling in the ramp and putting in some restrooms. This shows this kind of the scope of work. We'd have an access point here. This is an existing access point from the parking lot, but it doesn't meet ADA requirements, so we're coming down the sidewalk and into the building. We have the other two elevations, but these are really where we're doing the scope of work. This is what the building looks like today from De La Vina. It has this little trellis over the top of a old 6 or 7 foot wall that blocks off the openings that you see that are dashed in here. We're simply pulling those away and putting in a window and door system in each one. The site wall will be improved to be raised up a little bit and enclose the patio. And that's shown kind of in this dashed line along here. And then the ADA access point into this space will be here now. That's the only way we can get ADA access into this building because Carrillo's too low and this back entrance doesn't work. Along Carrillo side, all of this is staying existing. Here's the same detail that they had done, somebody had done a while back with the trellis and a wall. We're pulling those out and putting in 2 windows in the existing openings. And that is really what we're proposing. We're doing a new roof. It's going to be tile roof. The roof is failing, so we're going to pull off the tiles. We're going to put new roofing down and put the tile roof back on. And these are the other side elevations, which we're not doing any work on those as of yet. This is existing, and it's the same. There's been some discrepancy between archive plans and what's actually on site, so I think some of that's coordinated in our drawing. Like this window system doesn't exist anymore. It's been filled in. And that's the scope of our work, and I think, Chris, you can go through the landscape plans and explain that.
Thank you, Clay. Good afternoon, commission members.
I mean, I'd like to see those pictures, if possible.
Okay, so for this project, as you can see, there's a lot of gray and very little green. So there isn't a whole lot of landscaping happening here. As Clay mentioned, we're going to be removing some vegetation here, and wherever we could leave the existing to remain, we did that. And then, so there are some nice beds actually in here. These 3, 4, 5, 6. Everything else will be comprised of new low landscaping, parking lot appropriate, drought tolerant type planting. Basically we have a parking lot full of existing tipawanas and a lot of existing king palms and queen palms along the street, and a couple of jacarandas here. And beyond that, that's about the extent of the landscaping, basically just filling in the existing beds.
I just wanted to show this as we're talking about landscaping. Sorry. Phone ring. These photos are a little bit more descriptive of what's going on in this zone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very large ficus tree that's actually... Sorry. There's this very large ficus that's doing some damage to the building, and then this is the one that's in the parking lot. That's hard to do. This was planted in a very small bed, and it's buckling the sidewalk and doing some buckling in the parking area. So we felt that one definitely needed to.
Yeah, it was just originally a poor choice of tree for that location.
And then the rest of the vegetation, a little up close, are just some small little inconsequential plantings.
Thank you. If you're done, I'll ask for public comment. I think I have somebody. Oh, and a second person. Mr. DeForest, if you'll... Okay.
Kellum DeForest. Couple of questions here. Question number 1, does this mean the Radio Square project that this commission wrestled over for months is dead? Or is this just a temporary thing waiting for financing for that project to go ahead? The second question I have, or request, is what was that original structure? I can't remember. I guess, was it always designed as a restaurant space? I know Carol's was there for a number of years. So it would be interesting to know what the original architects, what their vision was for Radio Square. The third, and maybe did Radio Square get a historic landmarks, historic structures report? I don't know whether it deserved it. It's not that old. Thirdly, I deplore the destruction of trees. I think that ficus on the corner there is a character-defining tree for that intersection, and obviously provides shade for the pedestrians, and so I would hate to have that taken down, or any ficus taken down. I know there were a problem with because of their roots, a problem with sidewalks and construction, but that should be thoroughly investigated because they managed to save them on Upper State Street, so maybe this one could be saved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Mr. Mr. Jacobus, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to add to that, Radio Square is not historically significant due to alterations. The unfortunate thing is that the original building was actually quite sweet. It was a very simple, modern, straightforward building. They called it Radio Square because at the time, radio was a new concept, and everybody wanted to have a radio in their name, like the Radio Flyer Wagon, which has nothing to do with the radio. So that's the unfortunate thing, is that it was altered. And I believe the Carol's was always a Carol's, wasn't it? It was built.
I think so.
I think it was built as they have a cookie cutter restaurant. You don't think so?
Okay. So, Mr. DeForest, and regarding the ownership, I don't think that's our purview, though Mr. Orrell did refer to possible other changes that are in the offing. That may have been simply a throw-off line.
I'm not sure of what you're referring to.
Well, I think you were saying there were some changes here, and then you pointed that and said there may be other changes in the future.
No, the other two buildings on the site are just getting painted. That's it.
Okay.
This is no longer the Radio Square project.
Right. Well, I
know
actually,
that.
Just for the record.
Yes. Okay.
And is not going to be the Radio Square project.
I'm going to ask for Mr. Bard, please.
Is there a specified time? Is there a specified time? Okay. Well, my comments
2
will be
minutes,
brief.
yes.
I'm not an expert on architecture. I'm speaking as a local yokel who loves the building, and it's great to see the developers are bringing forth a vision for redevelopment of that property. I was very unhappy to see the current tenant boarding up the windows. And frankly, I was very happy to see the conveyance or the turnover in the tenancy, because the property, to me, will always be historically interesting, because the Martinez brothers used to perform there every week, essentially donating their time. The Martinez brothers are an icon in this community, and their father is probably, who passed away only recently, is probably going to go in the annals of Southern California musicians. All three sons are expert percussionists, and I would differ that historical interest is solely based on ancientness or pedigree. I do have a degree in history, and I think history is being made all the time. That being said, I have absolutely no desire to in any way encumber. This obviously group of developers are doing a very nice job, and they have looks like they have a good vision for this property. I would, just within the scope of HLAC, I would want to leave a lot of these other considerations to planning and zoning. These fellows are going to have to go through a lot of hurdles and hoops. But I would hope, that in the review at HLAC, that there's some attention to the type of windows and the style of windows that are being installed. So I would ask that detail come under your purview, and also the roof. But on the roof, I'm a little bit of a maverick, because I would urge relaxation of roof standards if required to get solar panels, or there are new tiles now that have that Spanish Mission tile look that have solar. So I would love to see a developer actually get that relaxed. So really, the ficus tree issue I don't think is an HLAC issue. Maybe it is. I don't think ficuses are natives. I love to protect trees, but I don't really think that ficus is a native. But I'll defer to people who know more about that than me. But I would ask that the window issue be a little more looked into. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move to questions from the Commission.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Shea.
I'm wondering how this conforms to the Pueblo Viejo ordinance.
Perhaps you were asking Mr. Orrell to explain that?
Yes, please.
Which part?
The whole thing.
Well, that's kind of a broad question. So, if I may, I might give you a broad answer. We're sitting in the HLC district, the EPV district. We're essentially putting back or improving what was once there, or covered up, or otherwise altered in a negative fashion. So, if it was a new structure or a brand new ground-up building, I would definitely apply a lot more of the standards on this project. But we're really talking about a cleanup, fix, and repair job on this building. So,
thank you.
Any other questions?
Not right now.
No, Ms. Arias.
I have a question regarding the ficus.
And have you considered trimming and putting in root barriers and things like this to save, I hate to lose significant trees in the city. I think that's important, being on an entranceway, main entranceway into the city, it's important. And I know they are very residual tree, and I was just wondering with root barriers and trimming if it could not possibly be maintained.
Well, what we've discovered is that a lot of the existing roots have damaged certain parts of the building that are unseen. So we have problems with sewer and plumbing and things that are underground as well as foundationally. So I don't know that we could remediate that at this stage in the game. If we were planting a new tree, I think it'd be much easier to control. But I think right now we're dealing with a situation in which the trees have been there long enough and they're doing damage to the structure. And I'm not in the business of killing the trees either, but we need to try to make sure that we protect the lifeblood of the building as well.
May I ask Mr. Suding his opinion on it, because I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dump it on you, but
I anticipated it. The tree is of age and of significance that root pruning it and adding barriers to it probably would hurt it more than anything else. And the fact is that the roots have probably already done the damage. They will continue to do damage, but cutting them and adding root barrier is not really a viable solution because of the age of the tree.
then I would like, may I continue with, I will ask if you have considered replacing it with a tree that would somewhat be a skyline tree in that area.
We haven't considered that at this point.
I'll ask further questions from the Commission.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Sutton.
I'm assuming this is a commercial zone, and there are no setbacks. So the patio, even though it's an intensification of use, is not required, or does not require a mod?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Ms. Murray?
I was a little confused. Are you taking both the trees out or just one? Both.
Both.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Lawar?
Point of clarification, you're removing the wall that's in front of the windows along Florida Street?
Yes, I think that's what you said. Is it this?
The low wall?
Was it? I think it was this one that you. This one.
This.
Yeah. What about the one to your right?
This?
Yeah.
No, we're not
That's
touching.
remaining.
This wall, we're not. The retaining wall does a weird thing. This one overlaps the other, and this one's tall, and then it comes down, and it's in the same plane. So we're taking this wall down, and we're just going to repair it and plant behind it. There's already planter in that zone, so we're just replanting it and taking these two elements off. So effectively, that would just come across like that.
And so you're not modifying that, the wall as it continues to move north?
As it continues all the way down here, correct. We're not remodifying
Which you've shown in your elevations then?
It's dashed. That's about it.
Yeah.
It should be shown as solid.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
can make
I
that
agree.
correction. No problem.
Any other questions? If there are no questions, I do have a question. You're talking about a new exterior paint color, but I haven't heard you describe what it's going to be.
Oh. We're taking our cues from essentially from the Ralph's building across the street because it has kind of a nice composition of colors. These are the colors that recently got approved at HLC for the two back buildings on the property. So we're doing a white body color. We're doing this blue color for the doors themselves, and then we have this brown color for some of the wood and eave details. Actually, this was the downspout, and then we were doing a cabot stain on the wood eaves. This building doesn't really have any wood eaves, and then are being proposed. And then we were doing just a slight shift in color for a wainscoting on the other building, which this building doesn't have really. It kind of has it with this wall, but we haven't applied all the colors yet to this structure. But this is the palette that was approved for the rest of the center. We're going to be using that on this building.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll come back.
Commission comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Sharp.
I am concerned that we are approving a redesign for a third of the building and ignoring what's going to happen with the rest of the building other than just be as it is. And I must say I'm also concerned about the lack of conformity to the guidelines. And I know it's an existing building. I know that the openings are there, and I understand. But I have also understand it's important that we continually upgrade and, in any remodel, incrementally bring the building up to what would be ideal for the district. So I have some concerns about both of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I
Mr.
echo
Sue.
Commissioner Sharp's comments. Would also add that if the coral tree and the ficus tree are going to be removed, that there be a tree for each is of similar value, biomass value. It is important to retain those tipos. Those do a lot for the driveway, and I know you are retaining them.
The what?
The tipoanas,
Sorry.
and I know you are. So, but I just want to make it clear that we don't want to see any of those go by the wayside. The entry on the east elevation, the one that faces Delavina Street, as proposed, it doesn't work at all. It just doesn't have that identification that an entry for a tenant would need. So you need to work on that a lot, and that is in keeping with Commissioner Sharp's comments that if you do go forward with an entry there, that it needs to conform to the guidelines, whether it be incrementally or not. It just needs to. And then as far as rooftop equipment, I think I heard something that you don't know what you're going to be proposing, but it needs to be screened, as you know.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Lavoy.
For the applicant's edification, this building dates from a period when this was an advisory committee, and what was considered Hispanic in this period was very loosely interpreted. Mike Carmichael is my guess, is the architect of this house, of this building.
Mm-mm.
No?
No.
Was it? Was it?
Don Sharp.
Don?
It was a gentleman that worked for Caro's who did the remodeling.
Okay.
He's the one that added the sawtooth for the booths and all that. The building dates back long before Caro's,
Okay.
as was stated.
But again, the walls were added that enclose the walls with the little
Walls and
was
beams
added
were
as
added
part of
by the Caro's architect.
Trying to make it a little more Hispanic than it was before. And unfortunately, what you're proposing is sort of taking what little token there was on this building to make it Hispanic, taking it off. And you're not proposing something that makes me go good riddance. And so what you need to do is go back and propose something that makes us excited about how this building is moving into our current understanding of guidelines.
Madam Chair, one
Yes.
quick comment. I believe this Carrillo was not in the district when this building was remodeled. The district goes to essentially the center line of Delavina, and the west side was not included. It's when the major arteries that go to State Street from the freeway, for instance, were added, which was after Caro's did the remodeling.
If I may, our record archives show that the building used to be sort of a 60s modern building in its original form, and then it was skinned to be Hispanic at some point by Peter Walker Hunt. We found some old drawings from him.
Thank you.
For just on the conversation.
I'm going to summarize what I think the concerns are, though I'm sure you understand them. That we're somewhat concerned by the partial description of work. And also by the fact that the guidelines of the Landmarks Commission, which are to partially, really to incrementally apply Spanish Mediterranean architecture in its various forms to the buildings, however small the changes are. The trees, if they are removed, I like that phrase, you'd like a similar value in biomass. We appreciate the fact that you're retaining the tipuanas. So I'm going to look for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Arias.
in your summary, I would like to reinforce what Commissioner Suding said about replacing those trees with significant trees to take the place of the ones that are being lost. I do know that tree roots get into sewer lines. I know that they now have contiguous sewer lines that are sealed all the way that roots don't get into. I also know there are treatment of the soil around the sewer lines that can eliminate the roots. So there are ways of dealing with it, and if you've got the problem now, you're going to have to replace it anyway. I still see that looking at a root barrier or something and trimming the tree might possibly work. But if that does not work, then I would certainly look very, very strongly at significant trees, because this is an entranceway to the city, and it's important that there be some green landscaping that's visible.
Thank
so
you.
I would really come in on a strong statement on that one.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So the difference between your comment in the summary and Mrs. Arias is the word significant. Should I add just significant trees of similar value, etc.?
Is that what you mean by biomass? Yes. I think either.
That's the important word. Yeah, I think that for me, my biggest concern is echoing all the comments that were made. The trees are also now becoming really quite a historical part of this property, and so removing the trees and not doing a good job on the building, I think, will just be double loss. And especially these trees, when you're driving in east, they really strike you. And Carrillo being one of the entrances to the city is important to keep something. So I was going to really echo those comments that were made.
So I'll revise my summary to say that the importance of the significant trees cannot be underlined enough in this case. Look for a motion.
To the continuance with those comments?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That motion carries. Thank you. The next item will be Mission Creek. Yes.
I need to ask if you all could give me back the historic structure detail. To say the tree that we're using is 3 separate
You mean the?
It's okay.
Okay, I sort of marked it up too.
What they want to do is get all the folds, gatefolds from the back, because those
Oh.
are kind of pricey.
Oh, they just want the gatefolds? Well, I want the front part. I like it. They just want the back part?
Well, they asked me to get the whole report.
Oh, sorry.
You're going to get a new one.
I am?
was going to do that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay.
I need the color copy.
There they are.
Stable? Yeah, there's, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yes. While you're getting ready, I'm going to read our motion from the last time we saw this 2 weeks ago. Provide corrected wrought iron fence details. The picket should be square and the steel should be galvanized. The majority of the commission could support the mixture of real sandstone and imitation sandstone, provide a constructible, is that a word? Elevation with depiction of the intent for the breakup of the imitation sandstone wall.
Greetings.
Greetings. Will you introduce yourselves?
This is Tom Conti from City Public Works, who's manager of the project. I'm David Black, landscape architect. So we felt like we've addressed the issues as you just enumerated them. And I will point out the revisions. As far as the wrought iron fencing, which is shown on this L1 sheet, we've indicated square pickets, and we've indicated that the iron would be galvanized.
Okay.
Okay. And then I guess you're all familiar with the project, right? It's improvements to Mission Creek from state. Okay.
Yes.
And then what we did, too, was we went out to the field, and we took some photographs, which are part of the working drawing documents, and we directed the contractor that he would have to, obviously, this photograph was taken at Mission Creek at the railroad station. Tom actually got down in the creek and with his rubber boots and took this photograph. But in addition to that, so this is part of the working drawing record. And in addition to that, we did a little, back to L1, we did a little as-built, and which indicates the basic dimensions of the block, as well as the cap. So the block is 20 to 22 inches high. It varies, as you can see, in length from anywhere from 12 to 18 feet to 2 feet to 4 feet. We've indicated the size of the grout joints, and also the size of the cap. And the cap is significantly larger than we actually showed before. We are, in fact, going to go, if you remember, we had indicated that all this work would be done with a shotcrete technique, which would be carved and colored and textured to match the existing. And we've decided, given the size of the existing caps on Mission Creek, because they're some 9 inches thick by a couple feet long by 2 feet wide, sometimes longer. So that'll all be part of the record, too, that they'll have to follow along with. So the contractor will be directly to go not only review what we've shown here, look at the photographs, but actually go to the site, and then provide us with mock-ups during the construction. So I think we've kind of gone a long ways to sort of address your concerns in terms of making sure that they get it right. And I think that was a good suggestion that we actually go out there and document the dimensions, because and that worked out nicely. So I think we have a good representation here of what's expected of the contractor during construction. I think those are the major components of your comments from the last meeting.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? If not, are there any questions from the Commission? Yes, Mr. Suding.
Mr. Ba- is it your intent on the cap to have that varying heights, like as shown? You have sort of an undulation along the top there. Is that your intent?
Well, I think if you go out there and you look at what's there, the real stone, it is.
So it is your intent.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
That's why we showed it that way.
And then if you could flip back to the first page for me, Commissioner. I noticed that this doesn't have the not in part phase 2 on it.
Yeah, I just took that off for clarity's sake.
So what are we reviewing? We're reviewing from State Street just past the existing pedestrian bridge?
Correct.
Okay.
It will be, I should point out, from my understanding, it will be built in phases, but the design vocabulary will be the same throughout. There will be the fencing and the walls.
I just want to be clear as to what
I understand. Yes.
The bottom of the creek is not being cemented.
No, it's natural.
Are there any other questions?
And then I should point out, too, just before we do, there is a section here. It's albeit rather engineer-like, but it does indicate, to match the existing, and we've eliminated the reference to real stone. So the entire thing would be shotcreted and colored and textured to match the historic walls. That's our intent, anyway. So there will be improvements, obviously, as part of the wall to accommodate tidewater gobies and what have you. So, and that's all part of it. And we've already talked about the swimming things.
Thank you. No questions? Any comments? I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Um,
Mr. Ing?
Much improved.
Oh, this is, thank you.
I look forward to seeing it look as authentic as possible. I know with shotcrete and the modern installation, it's not going to be exact, but we're aiming for as close as we can get. Then the last comment would be that the notes for the faux sandstone wall dimensions, your sandstone cap says 9-inch height by 24-inch width by 24-inch length. I think you need to add some variances in there.
Are there any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Oh, Mr. Boy. I thought it-
Detail on the sheet 1 of 1, the detail on the left, it seems rather awkward that the cap has exposed concrete below it, that it would be better to either wrap the shotcrete down into grade, down past grade, so that you're not seeing that joint. On the left side of the detail.
Oh.
You're gonna.
I see what you're saying.
The grade is actually going to be a couple inches below there.
He wants it wrapped around.
Yeah, so that, so you see 9 inches, and then the recess, and then hide the real concrete behind it.
On the back side.
On the back side?
Yeah.
Welcome back, Bill.
We'll take care of that.
Then, Madam Chair, if there are no other comments, a motion for approval with those two comments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Final approval.
Yes.
Conditions on the motion?
As was stated.
Can you please restate it? I am sorry.
That the sandstone cap wall dimensions have some variances in them.
Length.
In the length and height.
Okay.
Because that's how you're showing it. You're showing it varying in height. So variances in the dimensions of the length and height. And then at the back side of the cap wrap around the bond beam.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm 20 minutes ahead of the next item, so why don't we take a 5-minute break and hope they get here in 5 minutes. Oh, well, unfortunately, I have to wait 15 minutes before the item anyway because it's... Okay, so in 5 minutes, we'll reconvene.
Close your eyes, rest your head on my shoulder and sleep. Close your eyes, and I'll close mine. Close your eyes, let's pretend that we're both counting sheep. Close your eyes, this is divine music played day, and love will be our guide. Close your eyes. When you open them, dear, I'll be near by your side. So close your eyes, close your eyes.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order. The item is 101 West Canon Perdido Street. It is here for final review. I'm going to read the motion and the comments from the previous meeting. We had preliminary approval in September 15th of 2010 and continued. Preliminary approval had the following conditions: provide additional final details for the iron railings. 2, treat the wheelchair lift in a more traditional fashion that also helps it to blend in and disappear more into the recess of the building. This action was Drury-Boucher 5-1-0. Suiting opposed because he does not approve the proliferation of contemporary materials. Naylor, Peugeot, and Sharp were absent. Due to a lack of quorum in September 29th, only comments were made. This is a utilitarian building that was done beautifully in spite of its changes throughout the years. The landscaping changes are acceptable. Carissa is an appropriate plant for the area where it is proposed to be planted. An historic structures report would likely not be definitive. The loss of the columns would be regrettable. They are what set off the extreme contemporary feeling of the entrance. The majority felt that the entrance as proposed is not supportable. One commissioner felt that the entrance should reflect the industrial style of the building. One commissioner felt that the entrance should not emulate the other entrances in the building, but it should be more in proportion to the other openings. The preference would be to create an entry that delineates itself without the use of color. Sharp stepped down. Adams, Murray, Peugeot, Schallenberger absent.
Right.
Yes, we've got quite a mix-up of people appearing. So why don't you introduce yourselves to the record, and I'm going to let you know that we have 2 commissioners who are not here in your previous reviews. They are going to abstain, but they are here to provide quorum. So, okay, made himself known.
Abstain or what?
No, I'll make walk out of the room.
Okay, now, why don't you go through what you want to show us?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Historic Landmark Commission. My name is Michael Morgan from Blue Croy Limited, the applicant's representative. Do you need an address? 3961 Blackbird Way, Calabasas, 91302. For the benefit of the commissioners that were not here last time or have not seen this project before, I'll give a brief history of the project. The proposal is a 2-lot subdivision of the existing property located at 101 West Canon Perdido, which is at the northeast corner of Canon Perdido and Chapala Street. Driveways and parking areas extend out to the south to De La Guerra and to the west to De La Vina. The Lot 1 of the 2-lot subdivision contains the Verizon building at the corner of Canon Perdido and Chapala Street, and the purpose of that subdivision is to create condominium units within the building. It's a subdivision of existing space into 4 condominium units for commercial purposes. As part of the subdivision project, conditions of approval included the upgrade of public right-of-way improvements, including landscaping installations along Chapala Street, per the Chapala Street guidelines, landscape enhancements along Canon Perdido Street, and then the installation of a new planter at De La Guerra Street, which I believe may be slightly outside of the purview of the HLC. In addition, there is the requirement, it's a building code requirement to provide handicap accessibility to the entrance of the building off of Chapala Street. In order to provide that handicap accessibility, the proposal is to install a wheelchair lift at the existing entrance, which is shown.
Oops, my apologies. Perhaps you want to point it where you're.
Okay. This is the entrance.
Thank you.
And then
Thank you.
We're on sheet A6.1.
Oh, it's a killing. It's okay.
Actually, if I may back up for a moment, one comment I'd like to make about the landscaping. Although it was mentioned at the last hearing that the landscaping changes are acceptable, which
I guess one could assume that it would receive final approval with respect to landscaping. There's been a change made to these plans. After that hearing, the project was appealed, and it was appealed because of the proposed bulb out that was shown at the corner of Cannon Perdido and Chapala Street. And at the City Council hearing on January 24th, if memory serves correct, the City Council moved and approved the removal of the bulb out from the design for this intersection. So the landscaping that you see today is slightly modified from the landscaping that you saw on the 29th, in that the bulb out was removed, and there, as a result, some of the landscape planters that would have been in the public right-of-way have been eliminated because there is no bulb out. So none of the species changed, and none of the balance of the landscaping changed, with the exception of that tree well on De La Guerra that I mentioned. And aside from that, all the landscaping remains unchanged. As you may or may not recall from the last hearing, and as a matter of fact, if you drive by the building, I'm sure you'll notice that the entryway off of Chapala is a teal bluish color that some people like and some people do not. One of the recommendations that has been made consistently was to see if there was a way to modify the entry, and as noted in the minutes last time, without the use of color. And I believe the other the comment of reflecting the industrial style of the building. And what we did was we worked with our architects, worked with materials providers and different contractors, and started to get ideas on how we can make that happen. And what you see is the result. The proposed modification would essentially be the same form as what you've seen previously in a different color. Something that matches the existing building, something that matches the materials of the existing building and has a little bit more treatment on the top of the entryway that matches some of the other architectural detail that is shown on the elevation drawings. The material would look similar to this cast stone that's shown on our material board. I brought a couple of sample colors that may be considered. We're open to a suggestion, or if one color is preferred over another, we'll be more than happy to incorporate that into the design. The suggestion of the hearing, I believe on the 15th of September, it was requested that samples of the hand railing that is proposed or shown on the drawings be brought in. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a small sample, so they sent a large piece of railing and large pieces that we would have, you would typically order when you're actually doing the work. So we cut them down, and showed the raw form of the materials with the handrail end piece, tube sockets, and the two types of rods and spindles. These are proposed to be painted black, as shown on the plan, and then the cast molding that you see in the upper right corner would be a sample of what would be proposed, finished, of course, with the proper coloring at the top of the entryway. I also brought with me alternatives to the door that's on the actual lift. At previous hearing, it was suggested that in order to break up the appearance of it, perhaps we can show some wrought iron treatment or some treatment that matches the existing fencing or the existing handrail design, which is what's shown on the submitted plans. And then I brought with me a rendering that shows the door without that treatment for your consideration, because ultimately our goal is to receive final approval today, and we'd like to work with you on achieving that goal. So with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Yeah, the pictures that you gave me, Mr. Jacobus, are pictures of their previous proposal. Do you have any existing condition today pictures?
I'm going to ask for public comment while we're passing pictures back and forth. Mr.
Madam Chair,
DeForest?
if you could have the applicant, when he's talking about a certain part of that board that he has with him, place it on the camera
Yes.
because there's no record of it if he doesn't,
Right.
and then the people at home will be able to see it.
Okay, thank you.
Kellum DeForest, I think, I commend the architects. I think they've solved they have made this by removing the tile, the blue tile, which never fit, and they've worked this out. So I think this is as good as it is going to get, and I again want to say how pleased I am that they don't have to do a bulb out. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for questions from the commission.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Lavoy.
Is there an elevation that shows the current proposal on the full elevation so we understand the scale of it relative to the building?
Shown on sheet A0.1.
This shows the existing storefront, but it
This
doesn't show your proposed.
is not
Oh.
your proposal. I need that on an elevation.
Well, we show the detail of it in the kind of
You have-
zoom-in perspective.
Right.
We need
You're
it, we
asking
need
for
it
the
shown
overall.
on the elevation. You have an incomplete submittal.
Okay, that's the first time that was mentioned, so that's why you're seeing it the way that it is and the way that it's been submitted for the past several months.
Are there any other questions? Are there any comments?
Madam Chair,
Sarias.
I'd like the record to show that I'm sitting here to create a quorum, and I will not be acting on the project since I have not been acting on the previous times. But I'm sitting here so you have a quorum.
Thank you.
And me too. Madam Chair.
Thank you.
As noted before, 2 new members who were not here for previous are here to provide quorum, but will be abstaining. Are there any comments? Madam Boucher?
Just looking at the plan there, when was that door, was that originally there on the building, do you know? That
No.
entrance?
No.
I was
The
just
the
saying.
original building was only 2 stories tall, and it was on the corner of Canna Perdido and Chapala. And that was built back in what we're estimating the 20s or 30s.
Sure. Yeah, I know
It was
that.
expanded south,
Yes.
and
You can see where it was.
and west and up over the course of the last 60 years. The entrance in question, we believe, was improved in the late 70s, early 80s.
It
As,
certainly looks as though.
doesn't it? It's a sign of the times, if you will. And we believe that was part of the extension of the building to the south.
It's kind of difficult having a plan there and not having, I'm sorry, I didn't turn this on. Oh, it is on. Amazing. Thank you, Phil. You told me to turn it on in your brain. Not having the proposal shown on the elevations is kind of difficult.
If I may, we show it on as kind of a blown up elevation view,
Yes, I understand.
and had it been suggested previously that it be shown on the full elevation, we would have been more than happy to do so. It's not that we're
It's
avoiding it or
usually
anything.
what happens.
Yeah,
is
it's
that
just
if you're bringing in a plan, it usually
Yeah,
shows what
I
you're
guess
planning to do.
it's just a result of the focus on these detail plans. Every time that we've been here, it was lost in the shuffle.
Thank
I
you.
would hope that
Thank you.
we can visualize it.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Suding.
I think the landscape plan is still fine without the bulb outs.
Thank you.
But I will offer my comments on the entryway. I think you're almost there. There's a little bit too much filigree or too much attention played to the cornice and the header, if you will. I do like the color change. I think that helps immensely. It just sort of, it recedes now into the building elevation. I'm still not in favor of the handicap lift as proposed. It's just so awkward. I know what the program difficulties are. You've done a good job of explaining those. I really just wish it did not have to be there.
You and I both. May I ask a question to clarify your comment?
Probably not, no.
Okay.
Yes, it's really not a dialogue at this point.
Well, I just want to make a point then that this is existing and that is proposed.
Yes.
I know.
Okay. But again, this is not a dialogue unless there's a question from the commissioner.
I would agree with Bill's comments about the addition of the detail there.
Thank you.
Cornice detail?
Yes. And this has to come, it's a question, all the way out to the sidewalk the way it does. There's no way of avoiding that.
We talked about that, Commissioner Boucher, earlier.
I'm sure we did.
And
I'm sure we
because
did.
there's a basement room underneath that
right,
porch,
right.
it can't move back.
Right.
Yeah, we thought about that too. There's just no real way to do this unless we find a loophole. There's no way to get by not having this handicap ramp unless we find a loophole.
There's no entrance from the parking lot. I know we've been through this.
May I respond?
Yes.
Yes, there is an entrance from the parking lot. However, the building code requirement, as I understand it, is that we need to be able to provide the handicap access from the public right-of-way, from the direction of the general public, because it's unfair to assume that someone that is traveling down Chapala Street, for example, would have to enter into the parking lot and go all the way around to the rear of the building to enter. It has to be more readily available.
On the other hand, if the person drove to this location, that's where the handicapped parking place would be, right?
And that's correct, and that's exactly where they are. I think there's a site plan that shows that.
Thank you.
Further comments?
It just seems to me that the logical place for this would be close to the handicapped parking spaces. I don't see an awful lot of pedestrian use of Chapala at that location.
Got equal access.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It has to be primary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Murray?
No, I was just wondering, since it's being, there's a proposal for a lot division, so I guess that doesn't affect the ADA access still. Yeah, I just remember many meetings dealing with the ADA access, and it's still not perfect.
And I just want to make it clear that I do support the need for these facilities, to provide them.
Can you show me briefly, this is a question, where the existing columns were located? They were symmetrical about the entry.
Yes. Oh, I was
Yeah.
getting my configuration.
Yeah, so I'm wondering.
Here and here, the square dotted outline, detail number 7. That's the removal of
I see.
the existing
So
column.
it's the lift that caused the removal of the columns?
That's correct. And we toyed with the idea of moving the columns inward
Uh-huh,
in order to make room for the lift,
uh-huh.
but it didn't work right, because when the lift is introduced, the staircase, if it remained in the middle, it would be kind of favoring the south side too much. So we figured that
Favoring in what way?
just everything would be kind of skewed to the south. There wouldn't be any symmetry between the lift and this wall. So that's why the staircase was proposed to be moved a little northward, so that there would be kind of a symmetrical stairway entrance. That also worked with maintaining these large stone formations that exist today.
Thank you. My comment will be, and I'm sorry, you just looking at the minutes, it looks like you were, oddly enough, sort of scheduled so that some of us were here, some of us were absent. You were constantly facing a varying commission, and I'm sorry, you really were kind of caught there. My comment would be the same as it has been. I wanted those columns to stay. I felt that the size of the opening without the columns was not supportable as far as I'm concerned for this type of a building, and that's why I was asking you again about those columns. So again, I will repeat that because to my mind, those columns did not have to be moved. Another solution could have been found. So I cannot support this. I'm going to look for a motion.
Madam Chair, if I could provide some
Please.
advice to the applicant, not a specific
Comment to the project. This building is in the Spanish Renaissance style. It's a rare example of it in Santa Barbara. There's more examples of it in Los Angeles than we have. It's a very excellent example of that style. If you've been into the lobby, you'd understand how important this building was to the community at one point. Unfortunately, now filled with equipment. This entrance, while of a certain period, still has, in a very reduced manner, classical proportions in the openings. The tripartite and the more vertical than horizontal proportion is a derivative of this style as interpreted by some architects in the 40s and 50s. You see more of this stuff in D.C. than we see it here. So anything you do to this building needs to respect the building and its style and be extremely compatible with it, because nothing else will pass muster on this board.
I'll just add, in the columns, I was hoping that would allow you to have that verticality and that tripartite petitioning. And I'm sorry I was not anywhere as articulate as Mr. Lavoie was as to my intent in terms of proportionate openings. I'm going to look for a motion.
Well, I would.
May I just ask a question?
Yes.
What was the staff hearing officer resolution? Does it have any bearing on our? It just says it requires compliance with it.
Yes, it doesn't really affect this
Okay, thank
particular
you.
aspect.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there was, I recall myself when we were doing this project, it was there was a lot of discussions about the lift and how it was going to be treated and so forth. And I think because of all that back and forth, we sort of lost, at least I just have no memory of the columns being addressed.
I remember it.
Yeah, and then the last one was the last comments were what were the last comments?
Well, the comments were, this is a utilitarian building. It was done beautifully in spite of its changes throughout the years. The landscaping changes are acceptable, and historic structure support would likely be definitive. And here it is. The loss of the columns would be regrettable. They are what set off the extreme contemporary feeling of the entrance.
Yes.
Oh, there
I
you
believe
go.
that was me. The
The
majority felt that the entrance as proposed is not supportable. One commissioner felt that the entrance should reflect the industrial style of the building. One commissioner felt the entrance should not emulate the other entrances, but should be more in proportion to the other openings. The preference would be to create an entry that delineates itself without the use of color.
Oh.
To drive home a point
Oh,
Mr.
my
Lavoie was
goodness.
making about the quality of the building. That's the original lobby ceiling.
Where'd you find this?
Upstairs.
It's upstairs?
They're all upstairs,
That's
yes.
fantastic.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when we went looking
Can
for
you
that,
believe that?
2 years ago,
Well,
we could
yeah,
not
we
find
couldn't
it.
find it, but
And
yeah,
somebody has apparently absconded with all that woodwork.
Oh.
Yes, it's not this. It's not under the ceiling, it's kind of-
Crunch.
The type of building is, isn't it amazing?
No.
Wasn't it still
Oh, my
But there was a
goodness.
drop ceiling in there. When they pulled the portions of the drop ceiling out, we couldn't find the wood. And because this is actually exposed concrete, if you see right there, you can
Oh,
see the
yes.
board form. So it's very rustic and yet elegant at the same time. It's a very unusual building.
Oh, my. I
Thank
don't
you.
think it was good to have brought that down.
Well, I just think it helps drive the point home.
Yes, it does. It
Well,
does.
even
It
from the
does
outside,
indeed.
Madam Chair, I would like to see if we can form a motion to put back the columns and find a way to include the ADA lift and working within those columns. Because now that we look at it again and refresh our memories of all the going back and forth, and then in addition to what Commissioner Bill had enlightened in this building and its style and its place in Santa Barbara, I think we should be sure that we are completely in a good agreement of what how this entrance should be treated, even if we are accepting of the ADA lift.
Well, if I understand it, I think there's a motion being made for a continuation of this project and requesting the applicant to reconsider the removal of the columns and explore an alternate solution that retains the columns in order to respect the style of the building, which requires the proportion that can only be attained if those columns are there. Also to put the proposed elevation within the context of the entire building in order to display the proportions that are being proposed are appropriate to the entire building.
I'll second the motion if that was indeed a motion. Was that your motion, Fermina?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
collects all our comments, and also we have said in one of the comments that the materials of the railing is traditional, appropriate to that.
Is there a desire to add to the motion comments about the materials and about the proportions of the cornice, so on and so forth, or not?
Well, I'm not sure that I really approve of the cornice.
I think the wrought iron details are fine. And I also agree that the cornice needs to be more diminutive, if at all.
It's unnecessary
Yeah.
to the project.
Well, I think we'll just add to the motion that the wrought iron, proposed wrought iron are acceptable, but that the applicant shall revisit the cornice in light of our comments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Was there a second?
Yeah, I did.
How many weeks?
No, how many weeks? How many weeks, correct? 2 weeks? Whoa, all right. 2 weeks. That motion passes.
I abstain.
And 2 abstentions. Does it pass?
I tried.
Would you like me to remove this hunk from your presence?
That would be very helpful, yes.
It doesn't need to remain with the file, does it?
It's not foldable.
Request that the elevations be drawn on the elevation itself?
Yes, yes. And again, and again.
One, yeah, it was clear today, and one time was out. Okay. No, and that makes perfect sense. I think the point was you just got lost in the focusing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Could the historic building
Lucky for us, we have one of the most
apply and
Very prevalent building.
help solve the.
Those columns, oh, of course, and I appreciate it. Not at all. It's an unfortunate requirement that we need to mucky up the front, but there's no way around it. It's building.
Well, we're already doing
I'm sorry? The building code, I think, would trump that.
Yes.
You're talking about handicap accessibility?
But that allows a variation.
I don't think we'll be able to achieve that in 2 weeks, so we'll put the phones back.
Yeah, move over.
Okay, all right.
The next item is 26 Chapala Street.
Did you have a pleasant time out in the hall?
Yeah. Give me one, and I'll pass the other one down there. And boom.
Well, I guess we
Oh.
keep this one here.
A sheet substitution.
In terms of, is it just color, or is it complete sheet substitution?
It's a complete sheet substitution.
Staff, if we have a complete sheet substitution, is there not paperwork that Mr. Brett Murphy should be filling out and all sorts of things? And in general, we kind of discourage that because the public likes to see it. People come in ahead of time to see it and make their comments about it. So, okay, will you introduce yourselves for the record, and we'll start.
My name is Brian Murphy. I'm the architect on the project.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to read the minutes, or should I go into last comments?
Oh.
Or the motion?
I'm afraid I don't have the minutes from the last time. Oops. You have them. Thank you. Concept review motion. Continued indefinitely with positive comments to the staff hearing officer in the following comments. Landscaping. There's concern regarding the use of a canopy tree, which is greatly desired, but is being proposed in a planter that seems to be too narrow. Revisit the parking lot to provide a more beneficial environment for those trees. Architecture. The proposal is a great architectural improvement to the existing building. However, look closely at the proportions of the proposed clad wood windows and assure they are consistent with the windows that were there previously. Railings. It's preferred that the railings be wood and not metal so that they are more closely resemble the Monterey style being emulated. Thank you.
Since last you saw this, we needed to go to the show hearing board, and we went there and received their blessing. But in that process, we also discovered that there was a problem with the trash enclosure on the lot that was over in this area here, close to Mason Street, that was in the setback. So we've since then incorporated a new trash enclosure that obeys our setback requirements and is here on the, I guess that would be the northeast side of the project there in the corner near Mason Street, but out of the setbacks. So the project has changed in that regard just slightly. Taking the items maybe backwards. The railings, we definitely embrace the idea of the Monterey Revival style, and we're happy to incorporate the wood railings and think that definitely improves the project. Thank you for that suggestion. So we're bringing those through our balcony areas and incorporating the wood railings. A simple wood railing, I think, works best. Not to make it too ornate, but a simple railing. And the windows, we took a look at what windows are existing on the building, and there's a bit of an eclectic mix, especially in the building has been cobbled together in several phases, but the original portion of the building had a number of different windows that metal window that for all intents and purposes in the utilitarian areas looks to be original, as do some wood double hung windows. But we restudied the proportions to try and more closely match the breakups of those windows. We probably were a little carried away with getting too commutative with the breaking up of the windows previously. We are proposing to go to a largely sliding window condition. That seems to work a lot better for the owner, and he would much prefer that. In terms of the canopy tree, my first thought was to go to a tree grate and do away with the little planter there, because we are trying to get a tree in that area. But I couldn't find a tree grate that actually works in a traffic situation. I don't know if that's really something that's possible, but I was unable to find something that I could use for that, and perhaps it suggests that the tree would be a little too exposed there, a little too vulnerable. People would be driving into it. But instead I searched for a tree that grows in very tight quarters, and found the rosebud, Mexican rosebud. Seems to work well in very confined spaces as a small canopy tree. So I've incorporated a couple of those in the areas that we have very constrained planters. And in terms of reworking the parking lot, my hands are pretty tied. I can't really go anywhere. The lot is impacted, and I'm pretty much maxed out in terms of making the parking work with the new handicap van accessible space and such. I don't really have anywhere to move.
You're complete?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for public comment.
Thank you. Yes, as I recall from when this project was here previously, there was a suggestion that a substantial canopy tree be provided. This is, we don't want to make the West Beach area a desert, and does the king palm exist? Because in
Yes.
that what?
Yes.
The king palm exists, okay.
Yes, quite a large.
But you're taking out a palm tree nearer, nearer Cabrillo.
Yes.
Is there room for a canopy tree there? And so I think, it's just idea, I think this space needs a canopy tree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Are there any questions from the commission?
Madam Chair, I need to stand again.
Very well. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I just want to see the details of the window. You say they're all going to be sliding windows now?
Right, yes, that's a good question.
We do still have some double hungs proposed in the openings towards the rear of the building that we're replacing them in place, and we're trying to replace them in the existing openings. You can't really get a sliding window to work in those.
Okay, so those are
openings, yes.
But these are casements?
Those would be little sliding windows as well.
Okay.
No, they're currently, well, they've been changed. They're currently sliding windows that we're going to replace with new sliding windows. They're currently vinyl windows.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If there are no questions, we take comments.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Suding.
We do have a tight parking lot, and we don't really have much opportunity for a large canopy tree. And I don't think that we did say a significant canopy tree. I probably said canopy tree. And the selections that have been made are appropriate with the exception of the Cercis mexicana. That's not a variety that typically grows in this zone. It's more desert. So you're going to have a hard time down there at the beach growing that tree. You need to consult someone who's knowledgeable in the varieties that grow in this area, and that can take the seaside air.
Thank you.
Do we have photographs of the existing building? I'm trying to remember. It's been a while.
It has.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a lot of stuff, Jake, just... Thank you very much. Ah, yes. Kind of a mishmash, isn't it? Somebody's sleeping right there. Oh, I think that'll do it. Thank you. Thank you, Jake.
Any other comments?
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry. You don't show the windows on the upper level. And I'm looking at them here, and, you know, they are a mishmash, as you said. What do you plan to do with these large room windows on the second floor? Similar to what you have on the first floor, or what's going on?
Yeah, we're basically replacing the windows with a standard-sized 6040 sliding wood window. So those larger openings would be consolidated. You can kind of barely see them when they're there. They're in the shadow.
Because the upstairs windows now appear to be 8 or 9 feet wide.
Right, would be.
And so you're
reworking the
cutting
openings
that
a little
down.
bit, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have a question too. Is this window that close to the corner?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any comments? If there are no...
The medallions. I don't see them on the drawings. Maybe there's one there, and maybe... But do you plan to remove them? I know the owner loves them, but...
Our plan was to leave them on the stair area and to incorporate a few in the new arched opening areas.
But how about along the balcony and so forth?
No, they'd only be where we're showing them now, in a few locations.
Okay.
What do they represent?
They're just a little embellishment of the...
Thank you.
If there are no further comments, I'll look for a motion. This item is here for project design approval. I know.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sharp.
I know we all want to go home sometime, so
What's your rush?
somebody's got to do it. The sliding window issue of replacing all of them, which is what the owner would like, I have some concerns about. Not the quality that they exude or bring up, but just the fact that, you know, it's not what I think a building of this stature deserves. And I would like to see other than the sliding windows installed or reinstalled in some cases. But this is essentially what we had asked for, and so I make a motion for approval.
These are, oh, just,
With the window issue being something other than sliders.
these posts here are all metal across the balcony?
In one section of the building, yes. In the other section, there would. It was built at different times.
Ah, okay. This seems to be so narrow here.
I believe that is the side that's metal posts.
Okay.
I'm going to look for a second for this motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I agree with that motion. I am also was hesitating because I am troubled with the windows, and
Yes.
if we are doing this into a Monterey style, certainly sliders would not go
That's
so
right.
well with it. So
Absolutely.
now that we like the other Monterey elements, then I think the windows should be treated like they were in a Monterey facade, not sliders all around. So because there's quite a variety of here, and that's kind of actually make the building look authentic. And so, but now that you are doing this good job, I just think I agree with Commissioner Sharp that sliders I don't think would do it. But
Well, the question to you, Mr. Murphy, would be, can you replace those windows with similar proportioned windows? Or are you going to come back with changes to the elevations which would obviate our preliminary design approval?
No, I think that I would come back with the building largely unchanged, but replacing the windows with a double hung and fixed center or something, some configuration like that.
You're going to replace these with double hungs?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? 2 abstentions.
Madam Chair, under discussion,
Yes.
did the red bud comment get into the motion?
Don't think so.
Okay, change species of proposed red bud and make sure it's suitable for Zone 1 exposure.
Thank you.
And the person who seconded it, I didn't hear.
Murray.
Is this 2 weeks to consent for the windows, or what happened?
What was the motion?
We got preliminary approval. We didn't say final on consent or anything. We just said preliminary design approval.
Project design approval?
Right. Project design.
And continued then for 2 weeks?
Yes.
2 weeks?
Great.
2 weeks.
To full board, I think.
Okay.
All those in favor again?
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? 2 abstentions. Thank you. Thank you. Next item will be 330 State Street.
I need the color ones that you guys were looking at.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, you brought goodies.
Take that. Brian.
I'm going to read the motion and the comment from the last time. The motion was continued 2 weeks with the following comment. The commission appreciates the restraint that the architect has shown. The artistic design of the project is supportable. This will be an attractive and inviting project. There is some concern with respect to the use of the Senecio Mandralisque.
Pretty good.
Darn! Who wrote that in there?
It was those little silver things, right?
Blue chopsticks.
I know, but I was thinking, whoa. Okay. Will you introduce yourselves for the record?
I'm Jeff Shelton, architect for the project.
Philip Suding, landscape architect.
Okay.
All right, we've went back, bringing a few materials board with us, or materials, slightly revised color board. We've materials will show what's in the patio and some lamps, etc. We've got a revised landscape plan. We've got what else do we have? At the last minute, I don't know if Phil knows about this. They're requesting a transformer. Edison's requesting a transformer. Right here, just added that not very long ago. And so we can talk about that. They say it can't go anywhere else and not giving us any other choices. So I suppose that's as good as we can do. So as far as the plans, we haven't changed these plans. We have look at this lamp here.
Did you have that lying around?
I really like show and tell.
Did you have
See
this
what else
just
I have
lying
in
around?
here. I got all sorts of stuff in here. Yeah, I've got a lot of that stuff lying around actually for another project. This lamp here, which I have a full-scale thing of it here.
Oh, it's a dinky little thing.
Here we'll have a glass saw down on Mason Street there. We'll do a glass. It's got this. It's very similar to this. Of course, it'll be different and change as we get all the way down that down the cylinder there. There's another lamp here. There's a few other little sconces here and there on the building, which are shown on the elevations, and that will look like this. A little glass cylinder in it. Iron lamp. This is full scale.
Tinkerbell lives in there.
So those lamps, you'll see those as you turn the page here and there. There's one on the next one, on the next page. The brick, just why don't we turn that back here, Don. This brick herringbone in the zigzag pattern will be these two. It's on the color board, but here's the board for you to see. It'd be these two here.
Could you hold it up?
Sorry.
So we can see. Oh, thank you.
But can you bring it here for the TV viewing audience, so to speak?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And who can't see it?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Here,
good.
that's good.
And these are the color. This is the color thing I did last time. I added a few.
Yeah.
I'll show you this time. So that's that brick. Out here, which I showed here, we have this. The top of this curtain here would be this black acacia. All the wood on the interior is all from wood from Montecito, harvested from estates. So we're going to bring a little bit of that out, and it'll have to stay polished and I guess finished every so many years. So that's going to be out there. What else do we have? We have the gold leaf on the top here. Would be gold leaf. It'll probably be in a more of a scallop, more of a
Fish scale?
Fish scale pattern. And the good thing about the gold leaf is that it just doesn't need to be refinished, and it just stays where it is.
Thank you.
And
Great step.
then the tile bench, which you see on the plan, right at the entry here. I showed the concrete tile last time, but it's this is the sort of the. It's not real shiny. This one has a finish on it. These ones don't. It's very almost matte, but it's that flower pattern on page 5. here. And quite frankly, I haven't drawn out where the tiles go, but something with a white this clam background, and some sort of pattern of one field and maybe a border of one of the colors.
That's great.
I'm going to take the sign to the sign committee, but so we'll do it that way. We added a whole set of structural plans back here of mainly just concrete details. You can look at them back here, but they reflect the architecture. The door, the doors I showed you last time, this would be the jamb. The reason I'm adding panes here is because the rest of the place has these smaller panes. So it just felt better for me from the inside, and I think it's acceptable from the outside. And very simple square rails here, muttons and mullions when we have them. And this just connects right up to the existing woodwork right up here. And I got these details from from around the front door.
These are, excuse me, the tile all along here?
Yeah, that's on the inside, though.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. They're jalapenos. Are they green or red?
On the inside?
The jalapenos.
Those are actually it's a color similar to this.
Oh, okay.
And then those are shown out here in full scale. They're like, just to give you an idea. I mean that scale, as you see them there, is about like that. And that's what I give to the guy who blows the glass. He just
You don't have a brother who does that?
no, this is Saul Alcaraz. He's got a terrific shop down there.
I think we should have come to your office.
It'd have been easier.
Yeah.
And more stuff there, too. So I think that's it. I'm probably missing something here, but...
You want to look at landscape now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've finalized the landscape plan, and Commissioner Sharp made a good suggestion at the last meeting. And what we've done is taken the Diamondia here, where it would be more prone to heavy traffic, but still keeping some of the blue chalk sticks weaving in throughout. And I think that's going to be a really, really nice contrast in pattern and texture. Again, we're using aloes, strelitzia, the bird of paradise, and two varieties of aloe, bird of paradise, the blue chalk sticks, and the Diamondia. And we're using pretty good sizes of material. The fan aloe I'm proposing in 15-gallon, and the bird of paradise in 15-gallon. Again, these trees are existing. This is a big Tipuana. This is a decent-sized coral tree, and existing clump of palms. This tree, the Tipuana, we had proposed to remove, and you were in agreement with that. And then there's a cercis here that is being removed as well.
What is that?
Pardon?
What is that?
I'm sorry, not a cercis, a cassia,
Oh,
a gold medallion tree.
Yeah.
So it does open up the patio quite nicely. Otherwise, we're the same as we always were, with the exception of the mixed Diamondia and the chalk sticks.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, are there questions from the commission?
Phil, can you talk about the fountain? What is that?
No, but Jeff can. It's a teapot fountain.
Oh.
I think he brought it last time, and he can talk more.
I didn't get into... I haven't blown it up into bigger details, but I thought about it quite a bit. But the idea is I'd go find a bunch of teapots at thrift stores.
Lovely.
And then to make them all drain, to make them all flow at the same time is pretty tricky. But we're going to have a stainless steel pipe with tubes coming off of it, but we think we're going to actually fill the pots with resin. And so really, the water's going up through a pipe in and out the nozzle. Just it'll also keep it stronger if someone whacks away at it.
Children are gonna love
even
that.
if it does get broken, we'll glue the piece back on, and it'll look better. So it's sort of it'll be a work in progress, and if it needs to be removed from some review, about time when we try to get finalized, I'll do that and bring it in separately, whatever it takes. But just so they can open the restaurant, let's put it that way.
Yeah. When are they hoping to open?
Well, they hope in the summer.
Okay. Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Rios.
Just a word of advice, don't fill the teapot full of resin at the first pour. You know why, don't you? It's a catalytic reaction,
Yeah.
and it'll put a heat and break it.
It might not be something like a resin. I'm
Yeah,
not sure what this
just
is
be
gonna
very careful, because they do
Appreciate it.
produce heat when the two combine.
We'd like to get final. I think we're.
I think I asked for questions. If there are no more questions, are there any comments?
Have we seen the detail? Oh, this is a question. Have we seen the detail of these panels? I guess we did.
Bulkhead? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
This is the third concept review. Action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. Project requires historic resource findings.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
unless there are other comments, I'd make a motion for final approval.
Second it.
All those in favor?
With
Aye.
historic
Aye.
findings
The
made.
historic findings, which will be the project will not cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of an historical resource.
I would also like to commend the architect on his artistic endeavor and the completeness of the design thought.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Aww.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries.
Appreciate it
Thank you.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a wonderful project.